we're so pleased to have Katherine Keegan back with us. She's presented to BoulderNet like the first meeting of the year for like the last 3 years, starting in 2022. She gives a really good overview of what's going on in the Colorado employment scene. So Katherine, take it away. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll share my screen and make sure everything looks all right. Still looking good for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me again. I really enjoy coming to BoulderNet every year. It's my annual tradition, as I think I say every year when I come to join you all. I am the director for the Office of the Future of Work. And so we'll provide a little bit of background about the office and what we do, and then we'll just jump into kind of an overview of future of work trends. Part of the purpose of the Office of the Future of Work as it was established is to raise awareness about the impact of future of work trends on the jobs that are available, the skills needed for people to consider, and then to highlight just a lot of other resources that you all may want to check out to dive deeper into any one of the things I'll go over. So I consider myself a sort of aggregator of a lot of different information. And there's a ton of amazing resources across the state, from our state demographer's office to our labor market information team to the public workforce system, that provide a lot of additional deep dives. So we'll link to those resources throughout. But yeah, as I mentioned, for the background of the Office of the Future of Work, we were created through an executive order from Governor Polis in 2019, and then codified into state law a couple of years ago. And our purpose is to raise awareness about the future of work in Colorado in order to identify policies and programs that will build a more skilled and resilient workforce. So we do some of our own research to understand future of work trends. We share best practices and share other reports and information that are relevant for Colorado. We oversee the state's apprenticeship agency, so really trying to grow pathways into quality employment through registered apprenticeship. And we also oversee the state's digital access initiative, which is focused on making sure people have the digital skills, devices, and affordable access to internet they need in a digital economy. And then we do a lot of aligning and trying to inform other state efforts, whether that's through the Department of Higher Ed or Department of Local Affairs, and really try to be in the room to inform based on the research. So that's the office in a nutshell. What I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about is just what is the future of work and what does that look like in Colorado. When the office was created in 2019, there were a few other future of work commissions that were set up across the country. A lot of people were talking about the future of work. And at that time, it was a big focus on the growth of the gig workforce. So looking at independent contractors that were increasing their employment, the share of employment that they had in, like, because of Lyft and Uber and other sort of digital platforms that made it easy to access those. So that was one of the big reasons for the push around future of work topics. And then there was also a report that was published about a year before 2019, so it was published in 2018, that was a report on automation and the expected impacts to work. So you'll hear me talk about automation's impacts, and I think with the introduction of ChatGPT and other generative AI tools, we're seeing kind of a resurgence of conversations around what is the role of technology in the workplace. But for us in the office, we look, of course, at technological advances, but we're also looking at things like globalization and changing demographics in our state, as well as the market forces that are kind of reshaping the work that's available to do and how we do it. So this presentation kind of goes into each of these four forces. And I always like to give the caveat that these are obviously very complex forces. And so by no means am I saying this is the end all be all for each of these topics, but we try to pull out kind of the key trends that are impacting the workforce that we are paying attention to and think others might find informative. And why we're talking about this in the context of work and all these forces is because we just see the employment churn that is taking place as kind of part of the quote unquote natural process of employment. We see all of these different pieces that play a role in shaping what employment looks like in Colorado and in the United States. I have a lot of emphasis on automation because we did a new report this last year. And so, but we want to highlight some of those other features because other forces, because it's not one thing that's creating the context that we're all working in. Also, it's hard for me to see the chat. So if anyone has a burning question, you can feel free to unmute, or one of the Raina, if you want to like flag me and I can stop talking and answer as we go too. Okay, so starting with globalization and market forces, globalization, of course, referring to just the increasing interconnectedness of our world that has had an impact on jobs and who is doing that work across the country and in Colorado. And then market forces are really just a general term to refer to those shifts in supply, demand, trade, government priorities that impact the economy. So in previous presentations, when I've come to present, a big focus was the impact of COVID-19. And as we transition federally to a new administration and there's new federal priorities, we expect to see some shifts there as well. But I'll focus primarily on globalization and the impact it's had on, and some of the impacts it's had on the workforce. So I love to use DHL's Global Connectedness Index. It's a report that they release annually in partnership with NYU and their economics department. And what they look at is kind of 4 pieces that make up globalization. So they look at the flow of money or capital, the flow of people, the flow of information, and then trade. And so their sort of theory is that the combination of all of these things give us a sense of the overall connectedness of the world and of each country, and give us insight into how those have changed over the last 25 years. And so if you're curious about another country, they have a country by country profile that speaks to what is globalization and its impact for countries across the world. And you can go deeper into the United States profile on the website there. I should say too, I will share slides. So I have a lot of links and things in here. So you can definitely share that out with the group for anyone that wants to dive deeper. But what we see is that, global connectedness has remained at a record high level. We've seen how, in particular, information flows are really driving this globalization and this connection. We've seen changes in immigration policy across the world, and that's impacted the flow of people to different economies. And then we're seeing, of course, recent impacts on trade, and we'll see what the impact looks like as we progress through this year. But I think the big thing we want to emphasize is just that impact of the information and internet economy that is allowing for this increasingly globally connected world, because obviously that has an impact on jobs and where people are finding, where companies are finding the labor they need, and how that impacts the jobs that are available here. In Colorado, looking at the University of Colorado Business Outlook, they look at globalization across major sectors, and they found that professional and business services, specifically support services such as document preparation, call centers, travel agents, security, other professional office functions are the most impacted by globalization. And so that's where we're seeing decreased employment in Colorado, and some of those functions either being done by technology or offshored to other countries. And it's always kind of a big jump, I know, to shift from a general slide on globalization to a focus on what globalization has impacted. But what we know, and what I've said probably in each one of my presentations here, is that as a result of globalization in particular, we've seen a proliferation of low wage work across the United States and across Colorado. So while globalization has created opportunity for some, we do see how the international sort of competition in the marketplace can often drive down wages, even at a local level. We also see how market forces and other sort of impacts create an incentive for some of those more short-term earnings and drive down wages across the United States. And this is important because a lot of what we talk about in workforce development is unemployment rate. And what we know is that that's not the whole story, because people in a low wage job are employed. They're not contributing to an unemployment rate, but they're not often making enough to get by or to thrive in their local economy. And so we've seen in Colorado, this slide is actually from a report that was published last year, but in my follow-up, I'll share a link to a recent report from 2024 that was highlighting kind of historic and state trends related to wages. And what they found is that about 26% or 700,000 Colorado workers were earning less than $20 an hour. And knowing cost of living, I think for people in Boulder or anywhere in a lot of our mountain communities and front range communities, it's challenging to get by on a low wage on less than $20 per hour. According to the MIT living wage calculator, we find that for one adult in Colorado, living wage is $24.83 per hour. And if you look at Colorado's rate of low-wage workers, we find that 33% of all workers in Colorado are making less than that. And so a lot of the conversation we have now is focused on, and when I say we, in workforce development and education, is how are we making sure people are finding pathways to actual economic opportunity, and how are we ensuring that there's fewer low-wage jobs in our economy? And I think these are the right questions to be asking. One of the most important reports that I've reviewed as part of this work has also highlighted how challenging it is to leave low-wage work. And I know when I've come to BoulderNet in the past, we've gotten into really good discussions about how it can often feel like you're trapped in some of these professions that make it challenging to emerge out of. And what I like to share is that is a systemic problem. That's not an individual failure, but really a product of kind of these trends over the last few decades that have made it really competitive for low-wage workers and created very narrow pathways out of low-wage work. So what this slide is showing on the left is a report that highlighted how challenging it is to leave low-wage work once you're in it. They found that for every 4 years someone was in a low-wage job, they had their likelihood of having a higher paying job decreased by half. And by your 10th year in low-wage work, you had less than 1% chance of having a high-paying job or a not low-wage job. And so when we think about the volume, the number of people that are in low-wage work and the very narrow pathways out of low-wage work, it becomes really challenging and demoralizing. And that's really the charge that we have, is to make more pathways, widen those pathways and create more access so that that is more viable for more people. Another big part of that is a real shift to looking at skills-based hiring and emphasizing skills versus degrees or other proxies as one of the ways that we think the business environment needs to shift and that state incentives need to shift. And that relates to one of the reports I'll highlight here. There's a group called Opportunity at Work that is focused on STARS, is what they call it. So people who are skilled through alternative routes. Because what we know is that often low-wage work is some of the most critical work in our communities, and yet the skills created from and earned from low-wage work are not valued in the same way. And so we're really trying to shift that conversation to focus, to be skills first and to use skills as the currency to move forward. So that is a very brief overview of kind of globalization and market forces impacts. But I think the big thing I want to emphasize is that what we've seen is that the number of people in low wage jobs has increased pretty significantly and makes up a huge part of our economy. And that's what we're trying to shift and what we need to think about as we look at some of these other impacts. So demographic shifts also shape what work looks like in Colorado and beyond. And we find that Colorado is very similar to the rest of the United States in that it is aging quite rapidly. We have a significant portion of our labor force and population that is over the age of 50. And we know that's because we have the boomer generation that is aging and creating a shift in the labor market and creating a situation in which we have as many as 5 generations in the workforce. What we also know is that as you age, you face increased barriers to reemployment, or if you're unemployed, it becomes quite challenging to make sure that you're able to access employment at the level that you need. And we know that people are working longer. A lot of the stats you'll hear is about upcoming retirements are based purely on the idea that at 65, everyone's retiring, which we know isn't the reality. A lot of people are working longer because they want to or because they need to. And that's a big part of what we need to consider as we're thinking about our labor force and what it looks like and what policies and practices we have in place that either incentivize or in many cases disincentivize older workers from being considered for roles and thriving. We also have to think about those that are currently employed and approaching retirement in the next 5 to 10 years and how we're truly planning for that succession and skills transfer from people that are experienced in that field. So that's a huge part of the economy and the labor force that we're looking at. What this slide is from, it's from our state demographer's office, and just showing how looking at kind of decade by decade, you see that the number of people 65 plus, 65 to 74, well, yeah, 65 plus, even on the next bar is increasing, while we see that younger generations are not participating at the same rates. And that we have fewer people in younger generations. And that leads me to the kind of second demographic feature of our state that is similar to the US, which is that our younger generations are more diverse than any generation previously. We see that our populations under the age of 25 are more made up of more Indigenous, Black, African American, Latino, and Asian populations than previous generations. And yet we know that people of color have different outcomes in our existing employment and education systems. We see that in particular, Black and African American Coloradans have a much higher unemployment rate, and then that we also see lower education attainment rates. And so a big part of what we're looking at the state is how do we increase educational attainment and decrease unemployment for all Coloradans and make sure that we're not leaving anyone out or not tapping into any talent pools that are viable. This is important to understand because it's important to understand these dynamics within our population, because we need to be really intentional about how we're bringing people in from the sidelines and into the workplace, because we don't have enough workers for the jobs that are available. This is a result of declining birth rates and lower labor force participations in addition to the aging population. And if you look at the United States overall, by 2032, we anticipate that we'll have a gap of about 6 million workers. So the strategies need to be a sort of all of the above approach to think about how we are bringing more people into the workforce to meet the demands that exist. And that is a huge part of what we're looking at the state as well. If you want to dive deeper into some of those demographic shifts, this is where that STARS report is, I mentioned in the previous section. And there's also some really great just information about that provides a lot of context for the economy as it exists today. and can be quite validating if you're experiencing this as a job seeker or thinking about your career. It can often feel like you as an individual are doing something wrong. And so a big part of what I try to do in these presentations is just to share that context as information and kind of tools in your toolkit to understand the dynamics that are impacting job searching and educational attainment and other features. The other piece I want to really highlight here is the 2024 Talent Pipeline Report. This is released every year from our partners at the Colorado Workforce Development Council, and it looks at supply and demand in Colorado. And so it's a great resource to identify what are those top jobs that are in demand. It also shares what are the degree requirements for those. And it looks at some of the growing industries that might be worth a second look or a targeted focus if you're looking to reskill or upskill, and provide some more information there. So I haven't linked there. There's also an accompanying website that has the list of all those top jobs. Those top jobs are based on wages and growth in particular. So they're a great resource to look at. Okay. And then certainly, I was going to say last, but certainly not least, is technology. This is probably the number one thing people think about when they hear me say future of work or when they hear about future of work. And that's become even more true with the growth and adoption of artificial intelligence in daily life and in work life. And so I'm excited. This will have a few more updated slides than some of my previous sections, because as I mentioned, we were able to work with a partner organization to do a deep dive into automation in Colorado. That report is about 70 pages or so, and I'll share a link to that on these slides. But if you're curious and want to dive deeper, it's a great resource that we're excited to have available. But just for the highlights, I'll go through those now. As context, we tried to divide talking about technology into a few different categories to make it a bit clearer, because technology is evolving and a complicated, diverse space. And so we wanted to simplify it for the purposes of the report and to explain what we're talking about to everyone. So we divided automation into traditional and emerging. Traditional automation, as the description says, is really focused on reducing the level of human activity needed for a particular task, replacing humans for the completion of a specific task that follows a repeated, routine, non-cognitive pattern. So you'll see traditional automation really play out in robotics and programmable machines, accounting, software, customer service kiosks. It's what we've seen kind of at play for decades in terms of adoption at various sectors. And then emerging automation is really trying to capture more of what you hear about in the news today, which is looking at artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, large language models, autonomous systems, and machine learning. And so that kind of, it's captured in our emerging automation bucket because it's looking at the technology that is able to process large amounts of data and information and adapt and make decisions without that explicit input from humans. And so it's using the data it has and that it's programmed with and that it learns through the interactions to basically learn how to operate. And so LLMs like ChatGPT are a big example of this, robotic process automations, and then things like autonomous vehicles and mobile robots. My twin sister lives in Los Angeles, and she talks a lot about Waymo, the non-driving, the autonomous vehicles that are like the Ubers without drivers. And it's hard for me to imagine, but she says they're everywhere. And that's a big part of what we see across the board, is that we're just seeing adoption and interaction with more advanced technology than we've ever seen in the past. So I don't know if anyone else has experience with Waymo. I haven't used one yet, but I think it would freak me out, even though it's probably safer. And then digitalization just refers to the use of technologies for regular business processes, communication functions, things like Zoom or GPS that, or like a project management tool, things that make our lives easier, but aren't really like leveraging automation to make the decisions on our behalf. So, broad overview of various technologies. This is the report that I mentioned that came out in 2018 that was kind of spurring a lot of the conversations that you hear taking place today too, which is which jobs are technology going to replace? And what this report was looking at, and still a very good report that is referenced quite a bit in reports that are released today, it was trying to really assess based on the types of tasks that a specific occupation requires. They wanted to assess what tasks could be replaced by technology based on what we know technology can do. And so it was able to sort of chart a potential impact of automation based on purely the description of tasks and matching that to what technology could or could not do. And that's where you saw 73% of tasks within accommodation and food service that had the potential to be replaced by technology. Then you had manufacturing, retail as some of the industries that we expected to be most impacted. And then on the far right, you had those industries that rely less on those routine, repetitive tasks. And so we anticipated less impact from technology because technology couldn't replace those kind of uniquely human interactions or skills that were required. But I always emphasize that even on the far right of this graph, you have 27% of tasks within educational services, more than a quarter of the tasks people in that industry are doing every day that technology could improve. And so as we think about the workforce shortage, as we think about how we are needing to reduce the number of low wage jobs in the marketplace, figuring out where technology could make jobs better, easier, and make people do more with less is a big part of the conversation. So this was kind of a foundational report that is, again, still referenced, but as technology has continued to evolve, we've been trying to make sure we're staying on top of what does the impact of technology look like in Colorado as new technology has come up. And so this report that we commissioned last year was looking at which occupations, which industries in Colorado were most highly automated. And what we found was that the most highly automated industries include finance and insurance, manufacturing, transportation, and warehousing. And we broke down industries into levels of automation between high, medium, and low, just for the sake of kind of explaining impacts and grouping different occupations together. So we see that Colorado's least automated industries include construction, agriculture, forestry, fishing, hunting, and educational services. So not too different from that original slide from the original report that we often reference. The other thing I think is of course important to mention is that the degree of automation at the lowest end is around 20. So that's still a fair amount of technology that can be used. It's just compared to the higher automated industries. What we also saw was that the medium group of industries grew fastest since 2021. So we saw employment increase in those medium industries by 13%. The highly automated industries in that top section grew by 9% over the same period. And then the least automated industries grew by about 8%. So again, all of this is hopefully like context and information. And even as you think of your own skill development and job search, considering growth and what skills are associated with that will be a big kind of theme I hit on here. We also had the breakdown by region, looking at Front Range, Western Mountain, Eastern, and Southern. And we saw that the Front Range has the largest share of employment in highly automated industries. 1 in 3 jobs were in the highly automated industries in the Front Range. Southern and Western had more medium share, And then Eastern region has the largest share in the least automated industries. It was about 46% of those jobs. And so what I'll do next is we're going to go high, medium, and low automation industries group by group. And we'll go over what that industry growth looks like, some of the key interesting occupational changes that we saw, and then the impact on skills. And so again, I'll go through these fairly quickly just in the interest of time. And I have the report to share with you if you want to dive deeper. But there's some interesting nuance within these that has been helpful to consider as we look at Colorado. And so starting with the highest automation industries, this is looking at the size of that particular industry and then the growth. So what we saw was that professional, scientific, and technical services grew, and every other industry within the highest automated industries grew, except for finance and insurance. So that was the only industry and group of occupations that we saw decline between 2021 and 2024 from this highest automated group. And looking at some of the specific occupations that are part of those industries, we saw that technology-based occupations increased pretty significantly. So database architects, computer and information system managers, software developers increased quite a bit. We also saw that some of these additional tools are using technology within their jobs as well. So it's interesting to see growth in technology-based jobs while also knowing that ChatGPT and other of those types of services are replacing some of the tasks that they do. In particular, software development is relying a lot on ChatGPT for things like coding that once required a human being to do all parts of it. And so we believe that employment growth across these occupations can be attributed to the increasing role of automation in these industries because we know we need that additional work to be able to manage these automated systems and fully adopt. And then looking at the declining occupations within that group of highest automated industries, we see that slaughterers and meat packers, insurance claim and policy processing clerks, and helpers, production workers, saw significant decreases compared to other occupations. So we saw a 50% decline in these groups. Packers and packagers, you can see here, was one of the ones where we saw a decline. And so that is where we expect that automation is increasing efficiency and supporting these skilled production roles. And that's reducing the number of humans that are actually needed to do this work. And then when you look at skills for those highest automation industries, we're comparing what those skills looked like between 2013 and 2023. We saw monitoring, critical thinking, operation control, judgment and decision-making, and troubleshooting become increasingly important. And we would sort of expect this because as technology increases, you need the skills to be able to use technology, but then your human skills and human critical thinking and decision-making become extra important to monitor and manage those processes, even if technology is being used to replace some of those tasks. I think very interesting, as I was alluding to on the previous slide, we see a significant decrease in programming skills. And we would expect that as some of these large language models are able to take on a lot of what previously required those programming skills. Okay, so that's a brief deep dive of sorts into the highest automated industries. Now going into that medium. So this was the section of jobs that grew the most across Colorado. And that maps to this graph as well, where we didn't see any of these industries decline in the last 4 years. And so we saw accommodation and food services, real estate, utilities, healthcare, social assistance, wholesale trade, administrative support, and waste remediation. All of these experience growth. I think interesting with accommodation and food services growing significantly, second largest growth among all industries, regardless of that automation potential. And so when we look at the medium automated industries and the key growing occupations versus declining, we saw similar trends to the highest automation ones, where we saw more of those really tech-specific roles increase during the same period. So computer network architects, support services, those were increasing. I think what's one of the things that is really interesting from this is this contrast in growth between the cooks and fast food workers versus the first line supervisors of food preparation and serving workers. So what we see is, or what we anticipate from that, is that automation is impacting the demand for the skills in the workplace. So it's decreasing the demand for more of those production skills that can be automated, but increasing demand for supervision of those functions. And so looking at farm workers and laborers, crop, nursery, and greenhouse workers saw a decline as well. And what we're looking at there is some of these more manual labor-intensive jobs will likely continue to experience some automation-related displacement as we see increased adoption of automated technologies. And then the skills look somewhat similar to the highest automated industries with some slight differences, but we saw technical skills such as math and science decrease in importance, while social perceptiveness, service orientation increased, and equipment maintenance have increased. So some of those human and very technical skills associated with managing equipment increased. And so this could be due to that automation handling many of the technical tasks that required maybe math and science, and requiring that shift into more of those human focused skills. We also see, again, that decrease in the need for programming skills. And then the lowest automated industries. So here's where we saw a couple of industries that had experienced a decline or close to a decline. So agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting saw employment decline in the last 4 years. But we also saw a significant growth in arts, entertainment, and recreation. We saw mining, quarrying, and oil and gas extraction grew. Educational services and other services in construction grew. And yeah, the retail industry, it's hard to tell with that. You can see the arrow that kind of goes to right above 0%. That increased slightly, and agriculture was the one that decreased. And so, yeah, looking at what the occupations that improved in growth, we saw project management specialists, operations managers saw employment growth, laborers, freight, stock, and material movers experienced growth, likely driven by the cost of implementing automation outweighing the cost of labor for that specific role. The automation technology required to replace some of those movers can be quite cost prohibitive for many companies. And so you're seeing that balance of adoption of technology for some functions, while yeah, the labor associated with those functions might be cheaper. We saw an increase in those customer services representatives, which could suggest that the growing need for human interaction skills and empathy associated with that customer support, I think similar with cashiers. And then looking at packers and packagers, we saw the sharpest decline. Automated packaging systems have become much more prevalent across warehouses and factories. So we're seeing a reduced reliance on manual packing itself. Those functions are more automatable than laborers and freight stock material movers. So that's why you're seeing that distinction between the growth of laborers and movers versus the packaging itself. And then receptions, information clerks, bookkeeping and accounting and auditing declined, likely reflecting adoption of automation for those functions. And then, yeah, looking here, we saw instructing increased quite a bit from 2013 to 2023. Service orientation increased slightly. learning strategies decreased, troubleshooting decreased, programming decreased, and science decreased. So part of the theory behind that is with fewer automated systems, the demand for technical problem solving and strategic learning decreases, while again, interpersonal skills increase and the need to teach and guide others becomes essential. And so looking at all of these pieces, we're trying to really understand what are those in-demand skills needed in high growth industries so that we're making sure people who are impacted by automation have those skills necessary to succeed in whatever environment, whether that's low, medium, or high automation. And that leads to kind of just looking at how do skills change as technology is adopted and increased. So we see, as I've emphasized probably too much in the last few slides, is complex problem solving, writing, mathematics, operating, monitoring are the most important in highly automated industries. And then over the last 10 years, we've seen how the implementation of automation has changed which skills are in demand, with that emphasis on really human skills like critical thinking, judgment, and decision making. Programming consistently decreasing, science, mathematics skills have become less important across those industries too. And so when we think about automation and its role in Colorado and across the US, we know that different jobs have different impacts. And one of the things that we were looking at is how does automation correlate to job quality? In this case, we're looking at purely wages. And so we broke down the job tiers based on those wages. So you see tier 1 is 111,000 median annual salary, tier 2 lower than that, and then tier 3 the 46,100. And so we know that in Colorado, with 2 working adults and 2 children, each adult would need 1.4 tier 3 jobs to meet living wage as kind of a barometer for you all. And so what we see here is that tier 3 jobs represent about half of all Colorado jobs, while middle skill and middle wage tier 2 jobs, about 25%, just over 25%. And then the highest skill, highest wage jobs are the smallest share of Colorado jobs. So kind of underlining some of the low wage information I shared at the beginning of this presentation. And so what we see is generally though, Colorado has job quality that's slightly higher than the national average, but obviously still creates challenges for many individuals. And then, yes, this is, of course, where you see the breakdown by automation. And we see that the highest automation is connected to the highest automated industries are connected to the higher paying jobs. And this relates to just digitalization and digital skills required for work. So even as we think of automation's kind of broad adoption across many different sectors, we know that in every job, digital tools are advancing and becoming more and more required. And so we have a Colorado-specific version of this national report that found 91% of jobs in Colorado require at least some digital skills. And when we look at job quality, digital skills, and transitions, people in those lower wage jobs are more likely going to need to transition as a result of technology. And so we're seeing that continued focus on how do we make those transitions easier and more manageable and realistic for more people. And part of what we believe is that we need to build future-ready workers. This is a slide I think I've had on here since 2019, where we know that every worker requires a combination of those very human skills, the ability to learn technology, and to apply that in a business context. And so this framework came from an analysis of millions of job profiles and resumes that looked at which people were more resilient in the face of economic disruption and transformation from various recessions over the last 30 years to other impacts. And they found that individuals that had this combination of skill sets were more successful, but that only at that time about 1 in 5 workers in the US, according to their analysis, displayed these combinations of skills. And so as we think about building skilled and resilient workers, we know we need this, this new foundational set of skills in order to build on with that technical expertise. So we often talk about it as T-shaped workers. The top of the T is those foundational skills, and then I don't know what you call that, the base of the T is the technical skills for that specific job. And so if you want to go deeper, this was links to the report that we published. That was where all those automation impacts were from. And then we have a ton of other links for other information about how technology is shaping skills and jobs available. And so generally what we're focused on as a result of all of these trends is to make sure that we're building those future-ready workers with that combination of skills and a lifelong learning mindset to weather the ongoing transitions. We have to create those more viable pathways out of low-wage work and bring everyone into the workforce that is able to work. And we need to help employers develop actual sustainable and strategic talent pipelines versus continuing to do sort of business as usual, where when our population is changing and the needs are changing, we need a new way of doing business. Okay, that's my spiel. Happy to answer any questions.
Katherine, that was wonderful. I'm going to turn it back to Raina, and I'm going to stop recording, I think. So that was great.
Thank you, Katherine. That was very informative. I think, I think we all feel very impacted by this. I think, it's a lot to digest.
Yes.
I'm curious. It seems like, we're going through a tough time right now. I think we all can feel that here. And I'm curious about, not just kind of the current state, but you had that slide in there, the T-shaped workers, but what can we do? And I think somebody mentioned in the chat that, the upskilling and reskilling is going at such a slower pace than it had previously when there's been technological advancements. And now we're in this situation where we're like kind of falling behind. I'm curious, what can we say that's positive? What can we say that's like hopeful? What can we do? And of course, after this, we can open it up to Q&A, but I'm just curious about your thoughts on, what else is changing? We have a new administration, a lot of things are changing. What is kind of the plan? Do you know what some of the plans are? Or is that just completely up in the air like everything else?
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit. I think that in terms of kind of positive outlooks, I think that part of what I look at is where we need policy change, where we need like cultural change, where we need and where we need additional like programming and intervention. So I think one positive thing is Colorado is really at the forefront of a lot of this work and is looked at as a national leader for trying to like really change what employment can look like and what learning can look like. Our higher ed and community college system has been really innovative with short-term training credentials and internship and apprenticeship opportunities to connect folks to opportunity. As I mentioned at the top, our goal is to use apprenticeships as a more viable pathway for people to earn money while they learn. And so we're really trying to grow the number of apprenticeships, and I'll be happy to share the apprenticeship directory, and you'll see a wide variety of occupations that we're growing that in. And I think that technology adoption of technology, as I see some people talking about in the chat, I think we see a lot of employers trying to do it responsibly and to embed it in order to make to make things easier. And of course, there's always going to be the risk and employers that are using it to displace workers. But I think I've been really gratified. One, Colorado has a really large small business community, and the adoption of automation looks a lot different. And I think the emphasis on creating quality jobs for workers looks a lot different in that context. So yeah, I don't know. I think those are some of the things that make me hopeful. With the federal administration change, it has been a wild couple weeks. And so we don't have a ton of answers beyond what I think has been like publicly available through the news. But right now we're moving forward with the initiatives we have. I think a lot of our state funds have been invested in a way that allows us to move forward without relying completely on federal funding that is a bit up in the air. But yeah, we'll see how kind of the dust settles a little bit and what else comes. But it has been, yeah, a wild couple weeks.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. Okay, well, thank you, Katherine. Let's open it up to Q&A here. Anyone have a question for Katherine?
And I can stop sharing too.
Yeah.
Anyone have any thoughts about, oh, Trent, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, one of the questions that came through the chat was regarding the workforce centers. And I know you just said that, it's only been a couple of weeks since the change of administrations. And, executive orders, are in the executive branch, which, the budget's in the legislative branch, and that's really where the money comes from. But do you have a sense of how, we typically, really stress, right? The job search activity is fundamentally a sales and marketing, right? The job seeker is the product, right? And the workforce center helps people refine their sales and marketing approach to selling themselves, right? And they do a fantastic job at that. So one of the things we typically really stress is, hey, if you haven't yet made use and gotten yourself to the workforce centers, go do that, because they're fantastic at helping you hone your approach to selling yourself. But if the new administration cuts all the funding for that, that's a problem. But are you hearing rumblings about that? If you can speak to any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. In Colorado, our workforce system is like the funding flows through the state, but then is county run, and we've seen a lot of specific counties invest in their workforce system in addition to the federal funds. So that gives me some hope, and again, some of the state funds that are going to continue to flow through. Right now, we have access to our funding systems, and I feel like for us with apprenticeship and workforce, like workforce is generally quite bipartisan and is an important priority for most administrations. And so we're feeling sort of cautiously optimistic there, though, of course, I think with the broad scope of the federal administration's kind of disruption right now, we don't know for sure. So I don't have any like positive answers for all of that. I think we're in a similar boat to where you all are feeling, but generally workforce development is quite bipartisan and is something that it continues to be a priority for most administrations. Whether that'll look slightly different is kind of the big thing. I think funding will still continue to flow, but it just might be different requirements or things like that might expect to shift. That's what we're kind of trying to think about.
Katherine, I think that Trent is referring to something I put in the chat.
Oh.
A friend of mine works for Workforce Center back in the Midwest, and they had a informal announcement, a joint announcement from the Michigan Senator and House of Representative that to the Workforce Center that he works at, saying they're going to defund workforce centers in 2025. It was a direct, we're going to defund. And that came out of a joint message, informal memo from the senator and House representative in that state.
Fascinating. I will look into that.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
But it sounds like Colorado has more investment from the state and the municipalities than a lot of states like
Ohio and Michigan, where it's heavily funded by the federal government.
Yeah, and I think we also benefit from Senator Hickenlooper being the head of the health committee, and hoping that that has some influence as well. But yeah, it's so, I mean, I think we really don't have tons of answers right now.
Right,
We're
right,
hearing
exactly.
lots of rumors and things, but what we're operating right now is on the official guidance that we have, which is that funding is continuing to flow.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, it would be stupid to do that in 2025, but there's a lot of stupid things that get done.
I have a question. So as things become more, automated, we have to adopt the technology. Many of us, we have to adopt technology that we never thought that we'd have to adopt. And I'm curious about the different industries. I'm curious if anyone here in your specific industry, if you are curious about how you can adapt to the new workscape with everything kind of going in the direction of being automated. I'm curious if anyone has any questions about how it might affect your job, and if you're curious about getting advice on how you can kind of navigate that path. Does anyone have anything specific to your unique situation that you have questions or comments about?
I have something that I'd like to say, but it's probably not specific to what you just mentioned. And that is that I have been I'm obviously in the oldest group, and I do need to re-enter the workforce, not full-time, but in some capacity. And I guess what troubles me the most about this is that I have been a people person, even though I was in the entertainment industry. I should have stayed. I'm just kidding. And so I'm more people oriented, and everything that I see that's succeeding seems less and less human connection. Not completely, but such a major shift. And I find that the most troubling, because my heart sinks when I think about interacting only with a machine.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone at all. And I feel like when over the last few years was also when we saw kind of more introduction of the kiosks in grocery stores or fast food restaurants, and we're actually seeing some of that pull back because customers want to interact with a human. And so I've been sort of I don't know, I think like it's becoming a bit more nuanced than I think we once thought it would be, where it's like you're only going to interact with those robots. But I think that's coming as organizations are trying to adopt fully automated things and realizing people don't like that and want to interact with a person. So it's a slow kind of evolution. And I think at the end of the day, what we saw with the skills changes, the skill demand changes, and the types of occupations that were improving, it was emphasizing the human skills, which gives me a little bit more optimism too. Because I think automation technology can do a lot, but it can't do everything. And one of the big things we look at too is that a lot of people still don't have access to technology. So if we try to move everything to a digital platform, we're leaving out a lot of people. And so that's a big thing that we're thinking about too. So yeah, I share that concern. And it's been interesting to see the places in which it hasn't gone as far as I expected, or that they've pulled back.
Chris
Catherine,
says,
go ahead, Don.
Chris?
Oh, hi. I didn't know the protocol here, but I kind of want to go back to what the person before me, before her was saying. So in my industry, the one I was recently quote unquote replaced out of, which is a whole different set of issues. I'm in the accounting industry, and what I've seen as far as automation, and I am all for automation as long as it's done properly. But what I've seen is a lot of the lower level tasks, more like bookkeeping, repetitive tasks, like, QuickBooks always goes to software or something like that, that is being the focus of AI at this point. There are our industry is already shrinking by the fact that because there's a 5-year requirement, more people are not getting into accounting. So there is a shortage of accountants already. And I think what the trick is going to be is a lot of those lower level jobs are going to go away, and you're going to be forced to get a degree in order to compete, because the days of just going out of high school and learning bookkeeping and getting into it are pretty much gone. Now, I will say, in my experience, I am not impressed with a lot of the AI that I've seen trying to code things. I've had to correct more things than I care to think about as far as what IA suggested it should be. For example, a hotel bill could either be for a room or it could be room service. And those are completely different things from an accounting perspective. But if it sees Westin Hotel and always puts it to lodging, well, then you've got an error. So I don't know if it's a comment or question, but I just see that I think it's going to affect the undereducated even more than those of us who have degrees. And I have a master's degree, and I'm still finding it difficult to find something that is willing to pay me what I'm worth.
Yeah, no, I that's a very good point, and I think apt point. One of the things, I think the accounting is a good example, and we look at it often with state employment too, as kind of a test bed for some of these culture and like policy shifts that need to take place. A big place that I think we're looking for opportunities to kind of modernize is in like licensure, and some of these places where it's requiring a level of degree or something that doesn't really match how education and training could operate today, and also doesn't account for employers who maybe want to like train someone and bring them up to speed through an apprenticeship or other type of work-based learning model. And they could do that, but then that person can't get their license or can't get whatever sort of other certification they need. I don't know if that's not exactly what you were getting at, but just, I think there's some of these other things that are designed based on an economy that is much different than we currently have. And the pace of change in all of these different systems is very different too. So it's hard to move all the like chess pieces in a way that creates the outcomes we want to see for.
Well, and to that point, even within the industry, for example, when I was coming out of college, I don't know if things may have changed now, but if you wanted to get your CPA, you needed to work for a CPA firm for 2 years or an industry for 4 years, implying that you don't get as much experience in industry as you do. So like I passed my CPA right away, and I had to wait 2 years. And that's the only reason I went to a CPA firm out of college, was because I could get my licensure faster.
That's, yeah.
Or I would have gone into industry.
It's a fact, like how we value education versus work experience is like this huge thing that is fascinating, for lack of a better word, because yeah. Tina.
Hi, Catherine, thank you so much. This has really been really good information. I can't wait to get the presentation to dig into some of those research pieces you mentioned. I'm in to answer Raina's question and speak to that, I'm in the compliance and risk management space. And so the opportunity there, I think, is huge in terms of getting arms around all of this new technology and harnessing it and making sure that we are capturing it under the regulations that we need to. So I am on the other side. I'm trying to read and absorb everything I can about AI and automation and so forth. So
it's hard to keep up, especially I bet in your field. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and the misinformation that in its current form, it's the be all and end all, is out there, because I've had potential clients tell me those things like, well, why can't I just, have the AI do it? And I explained to them, well, the AI makes a lot of mistakes, more than you'd think.
Yeah, I think, AI is still in its infancy. It's only been out for what, 2 years for the public, maybe a little bit longer than that. This is the worst that it's ever going to be. So, it's just going to get more efficient and better at all these tasks with time. which is a good thing and it's a bad thing. And, obviously we have to figure out how to, just integrate humans within the systems, and we can use them and we can have jobs and everything. I think one thing to look into that I'm definitely going to be looking into after this is, what do these tech leaders, what do these AI company leaders see for the workforce? What do they see for it? Like, what does Elon Musk have to say about it? What does Sam Altman have to say about it? These are, the AI people. What do they have to say about it? And not to say that we need to follow anything that they're saying, but we need to know what they are talking about and what their perspective is, just so that we have that information, and at the very least. So, yeah, I think so. So are you plugged into different types of programs, Catherine, that people can get into? I think you mentioned some programs earlier that you were going to maybe share.
Yeah, I can share a few links into your comment and Julia's question in the chat too. I feel like there's like just information about technology and how it's evolving is like one piece, and then information about where people can learn some digital skills. We do have an emphasis primarily on more basic digital skills because we're worried about kind of the digital divide just widening as people don't have the like fundamental digital skills in addition to using some of these other tools. But there's some great resources available and short training that kind of just provides context and information about how these different tools can be used in various contexts. So I'll compile those and share them to be shared out. And then for like the tech information, I learn a lot from I don't know if people are podcast people, but the Hard Fork podcast from the New York Times has been, there's two guys that are fun personalities, but they just kind of like look at the tech news of the week and share a lot of information that has educated me quite a bit. And then there's a few other just like tech newsletters that I follow. The McKinsey's, the consulting firm, they do a great deep dive into various technologies. So some of those are linked in our annual report that I'll share too, but I'll do a better list too for you to send out. And I'd be curious, yeah, as other people have ones that they might go to, please share them with me, because I'm always trying to absorb as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. It's nice to have podcast recommendations and different, areas where we can go to get information, gather different perspectives. Yeah, if anyone else has any good things to share in that regard, then, feel free to share it with me or Catherine. I'd love to know for sure. Anyone else have any questions as it relates to the future of work in Colorado from you guys today? Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
This is Nadia. Let me see if I can, I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, hi everyone. I do have a question regarding, the impact if the federal, employees that are right now on hold waiting to see what's going to happen. We have about what, 40,000 federal workers here in Colorado. And, when we're looking at the future work in Colorado, I'm not sure, Catherine, if this is something that's going to be in conversation, if we have many of the thousands of our federal employees, leaving their jobs and finding themselves out there looking for work. Other companies, I don't know if this has been talked about. Is there a plan of how, these employees are supported? I see we're all like looking for opportunities, but I see that there's going to be more coming into the workforce more than we anticipate. And I was wanting to see if there's any conversation or any support or resources that the state is putting forth to support these employees leaving.
I'm not aware of any, and I just might not be in the conversations, but I'm not personally aware of any strategic effort from the state beyond the regular kind of workforce services and supports that are offered. But there are some cool national organizations. I've learned about this group called Work for America that prior to, it was a few months ago, I think they started up and have been really trying to focus on public service and pathways in there. And then with the federal administration change, there's, with any federal administration change, there's departures. And then with the, the fork in the road or whatever they call it for some of the federal workers and expected layoffs, the group has put together a program called Civic Match, where they're trying to match outgoing federal employees with opportunities at local and city, county, state governments. And so I think that's some of the cool type of organization that has sprung up based on the need. But yeah, that's my best answer. I don't know of any other formal effort to target the workers. There was a good article, I think in the Colorado Sun, where they were looking at kind of what the federal workforce in Colorado looks like and expected impacts. So I'll try to find that too and link it.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else? Anyone else have anything to add or ask?
Yeah, Raina, I was just going to add on the AI. I just posted a thing from Sabrina Romanoff. I've subscribed to her information. I've talked to her. She built and sold an AI company. She's on a mission to help 1 million people worldwide understand AI and use it. So I just put her newsletter into the chat. I highly recommend her stuff. She's got a free course on AI, and you'll find her on YouTube and TikTok and other sources, but really down to earth and really easy to talk to if you want to reach out to her, but great stuff and lots of prompts, etc.
Awesome. That's super helpful for anyone who's, new to AI and is apprehensive and kind of delving into it. Just getting that basic training will really set you up for success. I'm an AI user, so I, use it for various things. And, you can really just start out small and, ask it a few things and ask it how you can prompt it best. And it will kind of teach you how to use it, which is pretty cool. I went to Denver Startup Week last year, and just a bunch of startup companies get together and kind of launch their products, talk about their products, promote their products, get ideas, get people, giving them critical feedback about their products. It's a really good space to just kind of network and meet people that are starting businesses in your community. And God, it must have been 80% of the people there were starting AI companies. So, the companies that we have today are going to be very different than what is going to be coming in the future with all of the new AI focus that's happening. So, getting familiarized with AI is super important. And if, you can go to resources like Sabrina's, is it a podcast or YouTube?
She starts out with a newsletter, but she's got a whole bunch of resources, and
Okay.
she's beginner to intermediate.
Okay,
And
perfect.
so, yep.
Yeah, I would just, take it easy if it's scary to you to pop into it. But just learning a little bit every day. If you are currently unemployed, or if you're underemployed, or if you're employed but want to leave your current job, just time, just take a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there to kind of familiarize yourself with it. Might make your life a little bit easier, and it will prepare you for your next job, likely. All right. Anyone else have anything to add? Don?
You all can save the chat by clicking on the 3 horizontal dots at the top of the chat window, and then clicking on Save Chat.
I do see that Catherine posted her slides into the chat.
Yeah.
I'll email them as well, but just if people were wanting to download them now too, you can.
And Ann, you have something?
Yeah,
Yes,
quick note. Sorry, Ann, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just added something into the chat. I just was connected to an AI learning community that I found out about through somebody else I connected to, I think in one of Mark's boot camps. And they're just sort of crowd creating a community of AI learnings and it started small. It's now got over 200 members in it. And they have a Slack channel with resources. They're building a website. They have weekly meetings with presentations, and it's a good way to kind of get in there and start learning about it without feeling overwhelmed or put on the spot. And they have meetings on Wednesday mornings. It's based in the East Coast, so for the West Coasters, it's 6 a.m. in the morning, which is not awesome. But for Mountain, I can get up at 7. But they had, I think, at least 60 some people in the meeting, and there was a guy who was talking about how he used it with his law practice. But point being that lots of discussion, just good ways to find out more about it. So if you want to, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and ask me specifically about it, and then I'll figure out how to get you the information. That's it.
Thank you. That's very nice information for you to share. All right.
Just a note about our next meeting. So you might have noticed that we're starting to build a cadence here as a community, that typically on the first Thursday of the month, we'll have a speaker that'll bring information, knowledge, insight for you as job seekers. Then typically on the second Thursday of the month, we're going to have open networking for you. So this is a powerful opportunity for you as attendees to introduce yourself, practice your branding statement the way you introduce yourself, bring questions, come prepared to ask questions about your job search, what's interesting to you, what you want to gain insight into. It'll be an opportunity for you to talk amongst yourselves and really share things that are working. So again, next Thursday, 2:20, that'll be that open networking time to introduce yourself.
Yeah, that's actually the third Thursday of the month.
Excuse me. Thanks for counting correctly, Don.
Second meeting and but it's the third Thursday.
That's right. I don't do math. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, gosh, thank you so much, Catherine. This was so interesting to see, and you really provided us with a lot to think about. And I'm looking forward to delving into your slides later and really further analyzing it and figuring out, other resources that I could bring to this group to help prepare for what the future of work in Colorado is going to be. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to you or.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure my email's in the chat. And then, yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. I love coming to this group and seeing, it's cool that there's a Longmont offshoot now. It's exciting to see the growth. And if you all have ideas of things you'd like to see different in the future, I'm all ears. So please feel free to reach out.
Right.
Awesome.
And
Thanks,
Don,
Catherine.
please announce again, so folks know how they can access the recording.
Yeah,
It's going to be emailed out it's a YouTube, right, Don?
yes.
Yeah.
If it's okay with Catherine, I'll send it out.
Okay.
And I'll stop recording now.